Few men in Israeli politics today stir more emotions than this man, Danon, the deputy speaker of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. To his supporters, he's a patriot, a defender of the Jewish state, and a strong supporter of Israeli settlers. His opponents call him and his followers dangerous.
If I was in charge, I would have built much more all over Judea and Samaria, because I believe it's ours. We don't need to get permission from anyone for that.
One of his most controversial recent causes was making it legal to sue people for organizing boycotts, for example, against any products manufactured by Israeli settlers on the West Bank. He also wants to expel from the Knesset any member who joins any activity that would break the siege of Gaza. Danon is not shy about expressing his beliefs. We invited him to sit down with us in Jerusalem. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
Mahmoud Abbas has confirmed that he intends to go to the UN with a proposal that will, he hopes, make some kind of difference in the stalemate between the two sides. How do you think this is going to play out?
I think Mahmoud Abbas is actually telling us, I'm giving up. I'm giving up on negotiations. I'm giving up on the Oslo Accord that the Palestinians signed in the early 90s. And I'm giving up and actually having a dialogue with the Israelis.
Where are you interpreting that from? Because he has explicitly said time and again, and most recently as he made his statement, he's not giving up. He's explicitly said track one is always negotiation.
Well, you just need to go back and read the Oslo Accord that was signed in 1993 and 1995, where it says very clearly no side will actually take unilateral actions. And by going to the UN, the Palestinians are taking unilateral actions against Israel.
Explain how that is a unilateral action and building settlements is not, or going to what?
Just read the Oslo Accord. And by the way, the EU, the US, Russia, they all were witness to the Oslo Accord. And it said that no side will take unilateral actions for the final status of the land in Judea and Samaria. And by going to the UN, the Palestinians are saying, we gave up on the negotiation, we're going to go to the UN. It is a pity. I think it is a mistake, and it will go back to the Palestinians, because we now will have the opening to take unilateral actions as well. And that's what I'm recommending the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, to do.
Let me stop you there just for a minute before we get on to your unilateral action. So you're stating that in the past couple of decades or so since Oslo, the Israelis have done nothing that would constitute a unilateral action as a move to
nothing
the Palestinians.
That will determine the final status over the Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem, or over the core issues. Nothing was done in the international arena or in the Israeli parliament to take actual actions that will determine the outcome of the negotiations.
You don't think that establishing the settlements, the facts on the ground as they are so often called, is actually going to affect the final status?
Well, to my opinion, we haven't put too much facts on the ground. I wished we had 100,000 of Jews coming to live in Judea and Samaria over the last 20 years. But what we see today, that we don't see building in Judea and Samaria, we don't see building of new settlements.
Well, we're not talking specifically about Judea and Samaria, as you call it. We're talking about the entire overarching process. There have been facts on the ground, to the extent that the Palestinians have already admitted that any negotiations would have to take into account the facts on the ground that you've already established. So there has been a change in the final status already initiated by the Israeli side.
Well, the fact that Jews live in the land of Israel, it's since the time of the Bible. Nobody can change it, with all due respect to the Palestinians. Well, the Palestinians, you can argue about that, whether their connection to the land. But if you go back to the Oslo Accord, you don't see that we took actions or we build major new communities since the Oslo Accord. Unfortunately, if I was in charge, I would have built much more all over Judea and Samaria, because I believe it's ours. We don't need to get permission from anyone for that.
There have been, according to almost a very large number of independent surveys, plenty of new buildings, contrary to what you're saying. But let me just ask you what you were suggesting then otherwise. You're suggesting you will take your own unilateral action. Now, you've spoken in the past of annexation. Is that what you mean, or is there more?
I think it's one of the actions we should take, and I see September can be an opportunity for us. Because if we understand that there is no negotiation, there is no viable partner, the Palestinians are taking unilateral actions, it gives us the opening to take unilateral actions as well. And annexing the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, I think it is a major step we should consider to take, and I would recommend the Prime Minister to endorse my initiative on that.
You said one of the things. What else would you suggest doing?
Well, if you read the Oslo Accord, which I recommend to everyone who actually cares about what's happening in the Middle East, you understand that Israel took upon itself a lot of obligations regarding the Palestinian entity in terms of taxes, commerce, economic issues. And if the Oslo Accord are broken today, we have no commitment, and they can go to the EU, to the UN, and ask them to support their economy. I would be very happy to see how the international community will be able to support the economy in Judea and Samaria, will support the electricity in Gaza. By taking unilateral actions, I think it is a mistake, and in the long term, it will prove as a mistake of the Palestinians that will hurt the cause of the Palestinians themselves.
So that sounds awfully like you are threatening the Palestinians.
No, I'm not. Actually, because I'm coming from a point of view that I don't believe in the current leadership of the Palestinians.
Well, telling them that you will not pass on the tax revenue, you will cut off their water, you'll cut off their electricity, sounds awfully like...
Well, I don't know about your personal life, but if you get a divorce, there are consequences to that divorce. And the Palestinians, by going to the UN, they say we are going to divorce. So you cannot say, I'm divorcing you, but I want to stay in your apartment, I want to stay in your bedroom, and you will come and you continue to pay for everything in the house. No, if you want to divorce, we'll do it properly, but then we'll be disconnected completely. And I support that motion. I think we don't have a real partner today, so if we have to divorce, then let's do it from all sides.
We'll come on to the humanitarian issues in just a minute, because I think those are important. But from everything that you have said so far, it would appear that you don't even believe in a two-state solution at all.
To my perspective, the Palestinian state is not acceptable. And there is a place only for one state in the land of Israel. I think the long-term solution will be a Palestinian entity that is connected to Jordan and another Palestinian entity which is connected to Egypt. I do not believe in a two-state solution. And I think that when we see what's happening today in Gaza, the control of the Hamas and the acts of terror and the connection to Iran, if you ask me whether I want to have another terror state in my backyard, the answer is no. And I just...
So as far as you're concerned, Palestinians are terrorists and that is it?
No, I didn't say that. I see that I'm looking at what's happening today in Gaza, and you cannot ignore it. You cannot ignore the Hamas.
As I say, we keep coming back to this essential formulation that you keep presenting, and that is that on the one side are terrorists, on the other side are the Israelis, and that is about as complicated as it gets.
Well, I think it's not black and white. Definitely it's not.
I mean, the way you're presenting it seems to come across
it's much more complex, and it is very delicate, and the issues of proximity are very sensitive. And because of that, we cannot take actions only because there is pressure coming from the US or the EU. Because tomorrow morning, if God forbid there will be suicide bombers in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, to whom we will go? To the EU, to the US? And it happened after the Oslo Accords, which we signed. We brought Arafat from Tunis to Jerusalem, to Ramallah, and we saw what happened here. We got suicide bombers all over the state of Israel. So we have to be very cautious, and we have to open our ears, because when I see the linkage between Abu Mazen, Ania, and Iran, I am very worried about it. And I think the people of Israel today are shifted to the right because they see that connection. They see the triangle of Hezbollah in the north, Hamas in the south, and Iran, and they see Abu Mazen working with those forces and not against them.
Let me put to you a question that was asked by one of the local politicians, the Palestinian legislator Ahmed Tibi, and this was a question he posed in the press fairly recently. What is a peace activist or a Palestinian allowed to do in order to oppose the occupation? Is there anything that you would agree to? Is there anything that you would consider legitimate opposition or support of their rights?
We are a very strong democracy, and it is very hard for me as a member of Knesset to hear the voices coming from those Arab leaders. Take, for example, Sheikh Raed Salah, who was arrested in the UK for the same incitement thing that he's telling here in Israel. But in Israel, we allow him to speak. He even went to speak in one of the universities, which get government funding.
Well, it's ironic that you bring this up, because you are the person who has been the prime mover behind a new law that everybody is calling the most anti-democratic stance that's been seen in a democratic country for many, many decades.
Well, I will get to that law in a minute. But those Arab leaders who choose to incite against Israel, there is a limit to what you can get. Imagine that you will have a congressman in the US Congress that will join Al-Qaeda, When we saw MK...
Once again, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'd rather not sort of keep defaulting to this presentation of threats and terror against you.
You mentioned the Arab MKs. One of them joined the flotilla, which came from Turkey, and she was on the same boat, a member of Knesset, Arab member of Knesset, on the same boat with the terrorists who came with the flotilla. So you cannot ignore it, and she's still in the Knesset. If you will come with me in an hour to the Knesset, you will see her speaking on the podium on behalf of the causes she wants to represent.
Well, actually,
this is a pure democracy.
Actually, we won't, because she has just been stripped of her rights of speaking in the Knesset and taking part in any vote.
Well, I saw her in the plenum about half an hour ago. She's still very active there, and I don't recall any member of parliament in Europe which joined the forces against its own state, which can actually continue with the actions.
Well, I don't know if it's been brought in yet, but it's reported in your own press only last week, and I will read you the exact quote from the newspapers. The Israeli Arab MK Hanin Zuebi will be stripped of her rights to address the Knesset and to participate in committee votes until the end of this parliamentary session. This a ruling by the Knesset Ethics Committee.
It's a pity. And I was one of the MKs who petitioned against MK Zuebi. It's a pity that you got 2 weeks, because we are going to be off session in a week. She got 2 weeks penalty not to speak in the plenum. After she went on a boat...
So it should be longer than 2 weeks?
She should be expelled from the Knesset.
So having...
Completely. You cannot be a member of the Israeli Knesset. You cannot get a salary from the Israeli government, get a car and a cell phone from the Israeli government, and you can join the forces of the flotillas which fight against Israel.
Just a couple of moments ago, you were telling me that Israel was a completely democratic Senate because you allow Arab MPs to speak in the Senate even though they have participated in the flotilla. And now you're telling me, in fact, you want her off.
Some of the Arab MKs are crossing the line and they're using the democracy. I'll give you an example. The mentor of MK Zuebi was MK Azmi Bishara. MK Azmi Bishara, during the Second Lebanon War, was talking to the Hezbollah, guiding them where to send the missiles to Israel from the Knesset. He was caught, he was taped, and he fled the country because he didn't want to face a trial. So when you cross the line and you become a traitor, we have to deal with that.
And the line, as you call it, is determined by who?
We have a very strong judicial system, and the fact that MK Azmi Bishara, even after we had taped, that when we have proof that he spoke with the Hezbollah, and he guided them where to send the missiles to Israel during the war, he wasn't arrested. He was brought to investigation, and then when he saw the information, he decided to flee the country.
The Association for Civil Rights in Israel says these laws will have severe ramifications for basic human rights and civil liberties and contribute to undemocratic and racist public stands.
So let's talk about the law for a minute.
Are you a racist?
No, I'm not. But let's talk about the law
But
itself.
you speak in terms of so-called Palestinians and you suggest that they have no rights to be here.
I'm not a racist, but you should look at the facts. And if you read the law, that I was one of the main initiators of the bill, you will understand that it calls that if somebody is declaring a boycott against any group, the group that was affected by the boycott can sue him in civil court. For example, if someone
the law also says that they can sue in a civil court without need to provide evidence, doesn't it?
Correct.
Now,
for example,
what kind of a legal system is that when you don't need to provide evidence for any claim? Doesn't that open the door for any manner of mischief?
You can count on the judicial system that they will look at each case for itself. But let me give you an example. If there will be a group of Israelis today which will decide to boycott the Arab village in the Galilee, and they will say, do not buy hummus tehina from this village in the Galilee because they are Arabs. Those people will be able to sue them in court. It doesn't say only boycott against Israel or boycott against Jews who live in Judea and Samaria. It's against boycott, and I think it is a very good law because if you put a boycott on me and I'm being affected by that, I should have the right to ask for compensation.
So the Rami Levy supermarket that I read about today at the Gush Etzion junction, which has just been boycotted, that has the right to sue, does it?
If somebody will feel that because of a boycott is being hurt, he can go to court and ask for damages payment. Okay. It doesn't mean that automatically he will get it. He will have to prove his case in court, and our court system are not leaning to the right or to the left.
Because the boycott on the Rami Levy supermarket, which as you know is an Israeli chain, was called for by the rabbi of the local yeshiva.
Well, I don't know if you went there, but if you go to this Rami Levy supermarket, you will see a coexistence of Jews and Arabs which work together in the same supermarket.
And the whole reason why the rabbi has called for the boycott is because an Arab boy and a Jewish girl started getting too friendly, and that's why.
Well,
I mean, on the one hand, you're citing it as an example of interracial harmony, and yet it's breaking two of your apparently most important elements, which is that it's not actually particularly useful as an example of harmony, because the local rabbi doesn't want any mingling between the two different races, and he's boycotting a Jewish establishment, so he should be able to be sued.
Well, if you will go there, you will see that first of all they're making a lot of money, and I'm very happy for it. And you will see Arabs and Israelis who work together in the same place without the hatred and the incitement.
But is that a good thing?
I think it is a good thing.
So is it okay for a Jewish boy and a Palestinian girl, or vice versa, to form a relationship?
I would prefer that my children, and I will educate them to make connection with Jews. I believe in Jewish continuity, and I think that the same way that Jews who live in New York City should marry a Jewish boy or Jewish girl, Jews in Israel should marry the Jewish people in Israel. That's what my vision, that's what I believe. But you have a lot of places in Israel. Go to Hebrew University. 1 kilometer from where we are now, you will see hundreds of Arab students studying together with Jewish students. So you will go to the hospital, you will find Arab doctors with the Jewish doctors. All over Israel, you will find coexistence.
So I'm getting confused now, because now you're singing the praises of coexistence and people working together from the two sides, whereas 10 minutes ago you were portraying all the Palestinians as terrorists and saying that eventually your aim was to get them all to go to Jordan so that there wouldn't be any Israel.
I never say that they should go to Jordan. I never say they should leave their houses. And I think the Arab Israelis who live in Israel today...
Well, I think that's what you did say. So, I mean,
the Arab Israelis, they should, if they are loyal to the country and they are citizens, they should have the full rights like every other citizen in Israel. But what happened today, we see the leadership, instead of talking about welfare, education, closing the gaps, there are gaps between Arabs and Jews in Israel, they're talking about supporting the Hezbollah, the Hamas, Iran, flotillas, and they are not taking care of the population which elected them to take care of the civil issues, not to take care of the Hamas and Hezbollah.
The question of whether the mingling should be allowed or not. Again, I'm still a little bit confused, because you said earlier on that your
What do you mean by mingling?
Well, let me then get you to explain it. Let's fast forward as a thought experiment to an indeterminate time in the future when there is peace in these holy lands, a stable long-term solution to the conflict that we have now. What would that stable long-term solution look like to you? Describe to me the framework of the state that would exist in this land at that time.
I mentioned it in the past, the long-term vision. And I know it is very hard to say long-term, because people want to have fast solution. They want peace now. They want everything tomorrow morning. It's not going to happen tomorrow morning. The long-term solution will have to involve Jordan and Egypt as well, not only Israel. And I see the Palestinians, they're not going to move from where they live. Even though you mention it, maybe that's your platform. It's not my platform. They will stay where they are. But the mainland in Judea and Samaria is vacant. You don't have Jews, unfortunately. I wish we have millions of Jews living in Judea and Samaria. It is not the case. And you don't have Palestinians living there. The land is vacant. My vision that the majority of the land will be part of Israel, that we will annex the majority of the land without annexation of the major Arab communities.
And those areas upon which those Arab communities are now living?
Those entities will be decided about where they will vote, what they will do, will be decided between Israel and Jordan and the Palestinians themselves. That's my vision for the long term.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that. The land upon which they live now would belong to whom?
We will decide about it when we'll sit and negotiate with Jordan and the Palestinians. I don't want to be in charge, and we are not even today, over the cities in Judea and Samaria.
You keep mentioning Judea and Samaria. I'm wondering why you keep insisting on just that area. Is there a specific reason why you're not talking about everywhere else?
Well, we saw that in Gaza, what happened in Gaza, that we evacuated the communities in Gaza. So today what we have is Judea and Samaria, and that's what we argue about. That's what the negotiation is about. You can come and speak about Jerusalem as well. For me, the hills of Judea and Samaria That's the part of the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. It's part of the land of Israel. Some people want to refer to it in a different vocabulary, but I refer to them as the communities, the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria.
You said a moment ago the land was given to you thousands of years ago. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, I can give you an excellent book. It's one of the most popular books all over the world. It is the Bible. And you should read the Bible and see the connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. You cannot argue with that. The land was given to us. The land was bought illegally for us. And for thousands of years, we kept the connection between these ancient places, the tomb of the patriarchs, the tomb of Rachel, from the places of our ancestors to the people of Israel.
That doesn't amount to the land being given to you, does it?
Well, we have a lot of rights to the land. I refer by given to us the biblical rights.
Can you outline what those rights are?
We have the biblical rights, which I believe in them. That the biblical rights.
But the majority of the world doesn't. So why should we accept your
I'm telling you about what I believe.
Fine.
So maybe you will pass a law that Jews cannot believe in the connection between Jews and the land of Israel.
All I'm saying is that we now live in a world that is governed by international law and consensus. So what you believe is not necessarily important. What is important is the broader function and framework of society.
I bear to disagree with you. I think it is very important on what we believe and what we are committed to do, and not with the international society, because if you look at history and you go back to the Holocaust, you go back to the creation of Israel as a Jewish state, and you go back to all the decisions that we took, if we had to think about what the international community will do for the benefit of the Jews, we wouldn't have been here today. We have to take the decisions which are good for us as Jews in Israel. And for that matter, I want to go back to the biblical rights. We have international law rights, and these are basic rights. When in 1948, when the Palestinians decided not to accept the agreement that was offered to them, they cannot come back today and say, well, we want to play again.
People watching this conversation will look at this and say, Danny Danon is not willing to accept any alternative perspective. He has a paranoid and defensive view of the Palestinians, and there is no potential for bridging this gap. This is the. Do you think I'm wrong?
Well, you know that even after a paranoid, somebody is chasing sometimes. So you can call me.
Admitting you are paranoid.
You can call me a paranoid, but I think I'm realistic. I think that I am living here and I see the facts. I look at the history of what's happening here, and I know that trying to appease those organizations outside of Israel by making compromise that will put the lives of Jews in danger, it is unacceptable for me. So I look at myself as very realistic. I wish I could come with breaking the news about that we're going to have a new Middle East tomorrow, but when I see the connection of Hamas to Hezbollah and Iran, I have to be very cautious, and that's what we are doing.
But let's not talk about Hezbollah and Iran. Let's talk about the many.
Why we cannot talk? I was last night
because I'd like to bring this point up.
No, but let me.
There are very many influential, respected, often right-wing Zionist Israelis who have said time and again that Israeli security is better guaranteed by setting a two-state peaceful solution with Palestine right now than it is by following your particular principles.
Last night I went to the Galilee.
I
don't agree with that.
You don't agree with what?
That it will be safer.
That there are these people saying these things, or that there is a better future for Israel in this way?
But let me tell you, the majority of Israelis, when we went to elections, they voted for my party, the Likud party, and other parties which do not think the same way. Why is that? Because they don't feel that there is a viable partner today, and they feel that wherever we step out, Iran is stepping in. I was in the Galilee last night, and I spoke with the settlers who live in the Galilee, the Jewish people there, and they told me the stories about the Hezbollah getting ready for the next war in Lebanon.
Do you think this rightward shift is a trend? Do you see this continuing?
I believe so, because people are becoming more realistic. They were hopeful, they had a lot of expectations, but after they saw what happened in Gaza, that we pulled out, and Iran, Hamas came in, they feel if we'll do the same mistake in Judea and Samaria or in Jerusalem, if we will pull out, Hamas and Iran will step in. And for that matter, people are much more cautious, much more skeptical, and it's not coming only from my people, it's coming from the people of Israel who became more realistic.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.